You know, Doris, as they say, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. You look back at the presidential candidates that did that well with their acceptance speech. You could look at Reagan in 1980, Bush in 88, Bush 41, surprised a lot of people in 88, Clinton in 92, Obama in 08. Those were some highlights. Let me ask you, what does Kamala Harris need to do tonight to make that first impression with voters just tuning in?
Well, I think I'd even go further back in time to a candidate who made an impression, which is in 1932, when FDR was the first candidate to actually come and deliver the speech in person. Up until that time, they used to just wait, and the party elders would go to the candidate who'd won and say, "You won," and then he'd give a little speech in his hometown. But FDR knew he had to change the dynamic of a depression that had taken the mood of the country so far down. So he flies 8 hours from Albany to Chicago to give a talk, and the happy warrior is what he presents. And I think that's what Kamala will have to do tonight, too. Happy days are here again with the song that was sung, because he talked about, we're going to have a new deal. We're going to change the dynamics of this country, change the mood of the country. And overnight, the mood of the country changed because of his confidence and his optimism. I think JFK did the same thing in 1960. I mean, the problem for him was youth. Instead, he made it an asset. He said, we're going to take our youth, and we're going to go into the 60s with a whole new approach. We're looking forward, not backward. And then he likened himself to somebody different from the old guy. Eisenhower was only 70 at that time, but he was considered the old guy. And then his song was High Hopes. So you have that, all the ones you've mentioned. And I think the mood of the country has already changed. The mood of the Democratic Party certainly has changed. And I think she has to keep to that. Something is in the air, as they said last night, something in the air that's changed, that people in the leaders spoke to the people in the convention. They're now speaking to the people watching on television and telling them there's an action. There's things you have to do. You've got to get motivated. You've got to get to the polls. That's when rhetoric matters, when it makes a change in people's behavior. And if Kamala can keep that up and introduce herself just as Walz did last night, the Democrats are going to feel a different mood, certainly from a month ago. It's like a change in the atmosphere entirely.
Yeah, Lawrence, the Democrats have done so many things right. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about one thing they've done horribly wrong.
What?
Timing,
it's this little thing called scheduling in a live TV.
Prime time.
They have a lot to put together.
This is, as you said, this is a TV show. Mm-hmm. That when you start Barack Obama at what time?
11:02. That's 2 minutes after prime time. He was supposed to be finished 2 minutes before 11.
There's a real problem there, and they keep making this mistake every night, going too long.
But that's for the East Coast.
What do they need to do tonight?
Yeah, but Mika makes a good point, because a lot of people responded to that last night saying, well, wait a minute, what about the other time zones? Listen, it's not my design. It's the design of every single convention planner in the television age that it end at 11 p.m. Eastern, which is, by the way, prime time in Pennsylvania and Georgia. But so that's the design. And it's always been that way. And it's always been considered a failure when you slide over, because whatever you get after 11 p.m. will be a smaller audience for that speaker than that speaker would have gotten at 10:30 p.m. It's the nature of things. People have to go to bed at a certain point. But what's interesting about it is that Obama started after 11 p.m., but certainly at MSNBC, the ratings went up for Obama after 11 p.m.,
wow,
which is really difficult to happen. But it probably would have been higher if he was speaking at 10:30 p.m. when he was scheduled to be speaking. But, you know, Joe, I heard you and Donnie earlier talking about the comparison of the brightness of the Harris campaign to the Morning in America Reagan campaign. I heard from a former senator yesterday who's in a lot more contact with Republicans than I am, who was hearing that from his Republican friends, saying, hey, this is reminding me of that field, you know, that we had.
Well, and Lawrence, Donald Trump is playing into that by trashing America every day, by talking about America in decline, by talking about America being a, quote, stupid country. You talk about handing the mantle to Democrats.
It's what Buttigieg called the darkness last night. I, by the way, think last night the most important line of the night was in early prime time. Jeff Duncan, former lieutenant governor of Georgia, he said to Republican voters, he said to them directly, Republicans, if you vote for Kamala Harris, you're not a Democrat, you're a patriot. And what I was looking for in this convention, first two nights were, thrilled the base, and it did. And last night was the very first time there was a serious reach out to voters they don't have yet, and they might be able to get, the Nikki Haley Republican voter.
Right.
Jeff Duncan did a brilliant job of reaching out directly to that voter. I think tonight Kamala Harris will have to do both. She will thrill the base. She will find a way of echoing what Duncan said last night in reaching out to voters who she knows she does not yet have.
Right. I'm curious, Doris, before we go, what's going on with RFK Jr. and I guess the concern or word that he might be jumping to Trump, dropping out of the race. What's going on there?
Well, obviously, it hasn't worked what he was trying to do, so that whatever spin he's going to put on the idea that he's dropping out and encouraging Trump or endorsing him, hoping for a cabinet post, I'm not sure it's going to make a difference anymore. I mean, for a period of time, he was up to 20% early on. It's hard to imagine that earlier, because I think he seemed to be saying something different from the other two candidates. But I think it's now just going to go with a whimper rather than a bang when he comes out of this.
Yeah, it sounds like, according to our reporting and others, that RFK Jr. will drop out tomorrow and possibly endorse Donald Trump, is what we're hearing right now, though I think they're still negotiating with the Trump campaign on that.
Yeah, both men have events in Arizona tomorrow in the Phoenix area. The Kennedy campaign has put out a statement saying that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will address the nation about the future of his campaign. That's usually code for dropping out. But what we've been told is there are negotiations between the Trump and Kennedy side, but whether it'll be a formal endorsement, there's some talk of Trump offering a cabinet position, but all of that part of it still seems fluid. But it does seem clear that RFK Jr. will end his independent candidacy tomorrow.
Peace and art time.
There you go. So, Doug, let's give you one of the last words here on what we've seen so far and what comes next. As you know, having been to a lot of these and studied them, there's always enthusiasm at a convention. This is unusually high in that regard. But it's what comes over the next 75 days that will determine the election.
What was accomplished here in history is Black American women. This city of Chicago was Ida Wells, and it was always this. When you go down to Bronzeville, where Sam Cooke and Herbie Hancock and Quincy Jones and the likes went to the same schools, where when Emmett Till was killed, the mother of Emmett Till had the casket open here in this hall. Black women were ecstatic about Kamala Harris, but reminding people of Shirley Chisholm, reminding people of Fannie Lou Hamer, reminding when Jesse Jackson arrived. People came to him in a way I had never seen come to a politician. He showed up in a wheelchair. People in your business were dropping their mics to go see Reverend Jackson. And so this is Chicago, and this was Obama's arena. History will look at what Barack and Michelle did as this polished piece of oratory, humor, timing, both of them together is just utterly remarkable. And some of the clips, particularly the size one of Obama, will live in documentaries about this time forever. Kamala Harris now is also done the young people. Young people are so enthused. I saw former students of mine screaming, and I never thought I'd see one with a sign at randomly in Chicago, and they're energized. So the campuses are going to feel different this fall for Harris. She's already accomplished that, and the speech will only do it more.
And it is fascinating, J. Mart, to think about the parallel universe where President Biden stayed in the race and how different this event would be.
Well, he would have limped into Chicago and faced a divided party, and they would have obviously made the convention almost entirely about Trump, but there wouldn't have been that sense of joy and enthusiasm for something. It would have been all against something, and that's namely Donald Trump. Now Democrats, to Doug's point, obviously are unified against Trump. He's the great cohesive in their coalition today, but they're also now finally for somebody too, and they're enthusiastic. A lot of them are about their own nominee this time around.
Jonathan Martin, Doug Brinkley, great to have you both with us in Chicago. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Mika?
All right, Doris Kearns-Goodwin, thank you as well. And Lawrence O'Donnell, thank you. We'll be watching you tonight as part of MSNBC's primetime coverage of the Democratic National
Let's underline that
Convention.
word, prime time.
Yes,
coverage.
which-
And
So
let us
the hours
hope.
are?
Let us hope Kamala Harris is speaking
In prime
in prime time.
That's usually the plan. By the way,
right.
Joe, this is my anniversary appearance on this program. The
No.
first time I appeared on this show was
No.
the Democratic Convention in 2008. I can't do the math on how long ago
It's
that
a long
was.
time ago,
Yeah,
Lawrence.
and it was done in that restaurant, that breakfast place.
Right,
It was-
in Denver, right?
Yeah, in Denver. It was the most fun I'd had on TV.
It was a lot of
And
fun.
so I will see you in 4 years.
Until this
Oh my
morning.
God.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much.
It's
Again,
been
we
a
really
long
appreciate
time.
you getting up.
Coming up on Morning Joe, the Labor Department announced yesterday that the U.S. economy added far fewer jobs in 2023 and early 2024 than previously reported, the largest revision in 15 years. This comes as Wall Street turns its attention to Fed Chair Jerome Powell's high-profile speech tomorrow for any sign on how fast the Fed could cut rates. We'll be joined by CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin to break it all down. And as we